Once again, audio test 1 2 1 2 1 2 audio tests from the EV room. And, nous avons besoin de la traduction française aussi pour quelques mots. Audio test 1 2 1 2 1 2 audio test. Sounds good. Okay, thank you. We're going to do a very quick audio test now, if we can, with Mayor Lopez. Do you hear us okay?
I hear you perfectly. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and sorry for the delay. Could we do a check very quickly now with Mayor Sowa? Do you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. I can hear you very well. Thank you for joining us, and sorry for this delay. Okay, so we're slowly getting ready here. Thank you.
Hello and good day to wherever you're listening to us today. It is Friday, 15 March 2021. Apologies for the delay with some urgent last-minute changes. I hope you can all accommodate. Thank you. My name is Christian Lindmeier, and I'm welcoming you to today's Global COVID-19 press conference with a special focus on the equitable vaccine rollout in cities. We have simultaneous interpretation available in the 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, French, English, Spanish, and Russian, plus Portuguese and Hindi. Today's press conference will include 3 special guests representing the C40, a network of the world's megacities to discuss equitable vaccine rollout in cities. My pleasure to announce Adie Sowa, Mayor of Accra, Ghana; Claudia Lopez, Mayor of Bogota, Colombia; Iwan Aki Sawyer, Mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone. Welcome. Now let me introduce to you the participants here in the room. We have, of course, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, WHO Director General; Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO's Health Emergencies Program; Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove, Technical Lead on COVID-19; Dr. Bruce Aylward, Special Advisor to the Director General and Lead on the ACT Accelerator. And we have Dr. Rogerio Gaspar, Director for Regulation and Pre-Qualification. We have a couple of colleagues online, for example, also Dr. Sosifal, Assistant Director General for Emergency Response. With this, I hand over to the Director General for the opening remarks and the welcomes.
Thank you, Christian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. After 6 weeks of declining cases in January and February, we're now on track for a 4th consecutive week of increasing cases. For the moment, the number of deaths is still declining, but at a slower rate. Cases are increasing in most regions. These are worrying trends as we continue to see the impact of variants, opening up of societies, and inequitable vaccine rollout. As you know, WHO's Global Advisory Committee on Vaccine Safety met this week to review the data on blood clots and low platelets among some people who received the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The committee has concluded that the available data do not suggest any overall increase in clotting conditions following administration of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. As a result, the committee has recommended that the AstraZeneca vaccine's benefits outweigh its risks, with tremendous potential for preventing infections and deaths from COVID-19. The committee's full statement is available on WHO's website and has been sent to media. We understand that people may have had concerns about the safety of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The question with any pharmaceutical or vaccine is whether the risk of taking it is greater or less than the risk of the disease it's meant to prevent or treat. In this case, there is no question. COVID-19 is a deadly disease, and the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine can prevent it. It's also important to remember that COVID-19 itself can cause blood clots and low platelets. We urge countries to continue using this important vaccine. The AstraZeneca vaccine is especially important because it accounts for more than 90% of the vaccines being distributed through COVAX. While I'm pleased that almost 150 countries have now started vaccinating, we still face serious barriers in ramping up production and distribution. This afternoon, I spoke to leaders from Eastern Caribbean states. Although most of their countries have succeeded in preventing large numbers of infections and deaths, their economies, which rely heavily on tourism, have been decimated. They had a clear message: we need vaccines and we need them now. Next week, I'm planning to speak with my sister, Dr. Ngozi, Director General of the World Trade Organization, to discuss how we can overcome the barriers we face to boost production. Vaccine equity is particularly important in cities, especially where people live in crowded conditions and the risks of transmission are high. Cities are places where health can either be nourished or destroyed. Yesterday, I had the honor of addressing the C40 network, which connects 97 of the world's biggest cities, representing more than 700 million people. Although its main focus is climate change and air pollution, the C40 cities recognize that vaccine equity is essential for controlling the pandemic and driving a healthy and green recovery. I would especially like to thank the Mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, for signing WHO's declaration on vaccine equity in his capacity as chair of the C40 network. In response to the COVID-19, the WHO Healthy Cities Network has enabled cities to share experiences and lessons learned and to support the implementation of regional and national response plans and the WHO Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan. WHO is also part of the Bloomberg Partnership for Healthy Cities, which is offering cities support for vaccine preparedness and distribution. Today, we are honored to be joined by the mayors of 3 major cities. First, it's my honor to welcome His Excellency Mohammed R.J. Sowa, the mayor of Accra in Ghana, and the vice chair of the C40 network. Your Excellency, thank you so much for joining us today, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, the Director General of the World Health Organization, and we thank you for participating in our closed-door meeting yesterday, where you explained to us about the vaccine distribution across the globe. I'd like to speak briefly about what happens in Accra. Ghana received 600 doses of vaccine on 24th of February, and by 2nd March, we started the distribution of the vaccines. We had a couple of eligible people that took the vaccine: frontline security, health workers, executives, legislature, and other people that took the vaccine. The vaccine is to be taken in 2 phases: first jab and second jab in 8 weeks. But it was important for us as political leadership also to show that indeed the vaccines are safe. So the first person to take the vaccine was the president. And all of us as political leaders, religious and traditional leaders has taken our turns to take the vaccine. It's also important to state that Accra has a population of 5 million and we've taken only 300,000 doses of vaccine. Hence, there seems to be a high shortage of the vaccine. But the first phase is almost over, and some of the centers that we have already run out of the vaccines. We are calling for fair and equitable distribution of the vaccine globally so that we will always have the vaccine in all the areas. Because Accra has a transient population of about 2 million. Meanwhile, the vaccination has started in 2 regions, Accra and Kumasi. Meanwhile, as people also troop into Accra, 2 million people, they may be carrying the vaccine, they may be carrying the virus, and they have to take it back. And that's where our concern is. Our concern also is that this transient population that moves in and out could be the virus carriers, and they may be spreading it across the country. We are also working actively on the vaccine hesitancy among our population and through media and all of us as political, traditional, and religious leaders taking our turns to talk to our people. So it appears that the appetite for the vaccine has gone up high. It is informative and instructive also to note that the pandemic could be dealt with comprehensively through equal access and proportionate distribution of the vaccines. We are calling for equity, else our global effort to reach herd immunity will elude us. We are recommending two things for us to consider. One, if we could prioritize the sharing of the surplus doses procured by rich countries, that will help us so that we can get more of the vaccine. And the second recommendation also is that if we will accelerate the technology transfers of vaccines for other manufacturing countries also to take up, so that we can have more of the vaccines, and then we will be able to reach herd immunity as quickly as possible. These are key things that we are looking at, and we are hoping that as we move on in our conversation, I'll share more experience, and we thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you for the support of the C40 Network for Vaccine Equity. Now it's my honor to welcome Her Excellency Claudia Lopez, the Mayor of Bogota in Colombia. Your Excellency, buenos días, and you have the floor.
Buenos días, un placer saludarlos a todos desde Bogotá, Colombia. El señor presidente y directivo de la Organización Mundial de la Salud, mil gracias por esta invitación, y a los demás colegas, alcaldes de otras ciudades capitales, un abrazo para todos. Sin duda, lograr superar en el tiempo este propósito que hasta ahora no hemos logrado conseguir, de que haya una distribución equitativa y justa en el mundo a través del mecanismo de COVAX fundamentalmente, o de algunos otros mecanismos de las vacunas, es crítico. Pero también incrementar la capacidad de producción global. El mundo hizo casi un milagro, el mundo científico, y fue producir el suficiente conocimiento para que en el transcurso de un año lográramos tener varias vacunas confiables, seguras, para prevenir el COVID-19. Sin embargo, el gran cuello de botella en este momento no está en el conocimiento para haberla generado, sino en la capacidad de producción global para que todos podamos acceder. Mientras no haya suficiente capacidad de producción global, vamos a seguir teniendo inequidades en la distribución. Pensaría que en el inmediato corto plazo, y sugeriría, nos concentremos en dos propósitos muy concretos. Uno, en habilitar muchos más sitios de producción, en llegar a acuerdos que sean viables entre ciudades y países con las farmacéuticas que hoy tienen esta capacidad de conocimiento para incrementar capacidad de producción. En primer lugar, con el envasado y la distribución, con lo que se llama fill and finish, que es lo que en el inmediato corto plazo muchas ciudades capitales podríamos poner, pero que esto vaya con un contrato de compra, fill and finish y transferencia de tecnología para que en un plazo más de mediano plazo podamos no solamente hacer fill and finish, sino contribuir a la producción de estas vacunas. Y de manera tal que un objetivo de largo plazo sea que a diferentes ciudades y países nos quede la transferencia de tecnología y conocimiento para producir otro tipo de vacunas, no solamente las del COVID, sino que con esa transferencia de conocimiento y tecnología de esta vacuna del COVID-19 podamos desarrollar capacidades para otras. Hablo desde mi país, Bogotá y Colombia. Colombia tuvo la capacidad de producir vacunas para diferentes enfermedades hasta el año 2001. Por dejar de hacer la inversión científica y biotecnológica necesaria, perdió esa capacidad desde entonces, hace ya 20 años. Y qué caro estamos pagando esa pérdida de capacidad de conocimiento. Bogotá, que es la capital de Colombia, se complace, digamos, se enorgullece de tener aquí, localizada en nuestra ciudad, las mejores universidades públicas y privadas. Bogotá produce el 25% del PIB de Colombia. Es una ciudad de 8 millones de habitantes, vibrante, con un sector público muy robusto, con un sector académico y científico muy robusto. Hemos decidido proponerle al gobierno nacional y a 4 farmacéuticas, la rusa de Sputnik, la china que tiene un portafolio de varias vacunas, AstraZeneca y Johnson Johnson, que hagan un acuerdo como el que acabo de describir con Bogotá. Un acuerdo que incluya compra, fill and finish en el corto plazo, producción de la vacuna del COVID en el mediano y transferencia de conocimiento y tecnología para que podamos producir otro tipo de vacunas nuevamente en Bogotá y en Colombia. Y le agradecería profundamente a la Organización Mundial de la Salud que nos facilite y nos ayude a concretar este tipo de acuerdos ya con varias ciudades capitales. En América Latina, como lo saben ustedes, Argentina, Brasil y México han avanzado en esa dirección. Bogotá está lista. Bogotá no solamente tiene la capacidad científica, la capacidad de alianza de recursos entre el sector público y privado para que esto no sea simplemente la iniciativa de este gobierno, sino que trascienda en el tiempo. Tenemos los recursos públicos y privados, financieros y de conocimiento para sacar esta alianza adelante. Y además tenemos una posición logística de distribución envidiable por nuestra geografía. Somos justo el hub en la mitad de toda América, lo cual facilita además interconexiones logísticas y de distribución para América Latina, para América en general y para el mundo. Esto, por supuesto, requiere inversión pública. Tenemos los recursos públicos para hacerlo y si son necesarios más, tenemos los recursos necesarios para hacerlo. Y nos parece que la Organización Mundial de la Salud podría facilitarnos concretar este tipo de acuerdos. ¿Por qué escogimos esas 4 farmacéuticas? No porque tengamos dudas ni más faltada de las demás, sino porque esas 4 farmacéuticas que utilizan la tecnología de adenovirus o virus atenuado es la tecnología que sería posible adaptar en Colombia en un plazo relativamente mediano para poder producir otro tipo de vacunas, para que nos quede esa capacidad no solamente para el COVID, sino para otro tipo de vacunas. Yo la verdad creo que esa es la acción de corto plazo, que en la Organización Mundial de la Salud nos pongamos de acuerdo en otras ciudades, porque es que al final no solamente es un acuerdo entre países, sino entre ciudades capitales, entre ciudades del mundo que tengamos la capacidad de conocimiento científico, de inversión público-privada para sacar este tipo de iniciativas adelante, lo que nos va a ayudar a incrementar la capacidad de producción global, que es donde está hoy el principal cuello de botella, para que logremos sacar la vacuna en el mundo adelante. Haría una segunda sugerencia. Bogotá, por ejemplo, y Colombia, el Ministerio de Salud con quienes trabajamos muy de la mano, y nuestro Ministerio de Salud diseñó un plan de vacunación cuyo fundamento bioético compartimos, y fue darle prioridad a la población de más alto riesgo. Más de la mitad de quienes se agravan seriamente o fallecen de esta enfermedad tienen más de 60 años. Y el gobierno de Colombia decidió priorizar por escalas de edad, los mayores de 80, luego los mayores de 70, luego los mayores de 60, por el riesgo que corren la vacunación. Sin embargo, en Bogotá, que somos una ciudad de 8 millones de habitantes, tenemos que vacunar para llegar a la inmunidad de rebaño casi a 6 millones de habitantes, apenas hemos recibido 300.000 dosis. Apenas estamos cumpliendo la primera y segunda dosis de los mayores de 80 próximamente y del personal médico de primera línea. A este ritmo no será suficiente. Necesitamos tener un plan de vacunación masivo, universal y sin barreras. Las barreras que están poniendo, por ejemplo, en nuestro caso, el gobierno de Colombia, realmente no solamente es por razones bioéticas que compartimos, a mayor riesgo, mayor proximidad en la vacunación, sino realmente porque no tienen vacunas. Entonces hacen el proceso enredado, piden registros. Tenemos más registradores que vacunadores. Con eso les puedo resumir hoy qué tan problemático se ha diseñado el proceso de vacunación en Colombia. Realmente, porque no hay vacunas. Si hubiera vacunas suficientes, seguramente el Ministerio de Salud estaría de acuerdo con liberar barreras y hacer mucho más fácil el proceso. Pero sí quisiera decir a propósito de el riesgo de un tercer pico que tenemos, como lo ha expresado ya la Organización Mundial de la Salud, que es absolutamente crítico que antes de mayo, por lo menos en América Latina, cada país tendrá sus velocidades, en Bogotá sin duda, hayamos vacunado a toda la población mayor de 60 años y a todo el personal médico. Para darles un sentido a las proporciones, eso en Bogotá quiere decir haber vacunado a 1.300.000 personas, es decir, 2.600.000 dosis en la mayoría de las vacunas que requieren doble dosis. Si enfrentamos un próximo pico de la pandemia, sin tener a los mayores de 60 y al personal médico vacunado, realmente estamos corriendo una crisis enorme. Lo único que nos va a mitigar el efecto de un próximo pico de la pandemia es esa vacunación, de quienes más riesgo corren y de quienes más riesgo corren por razones profesionales. Igualmente, el retorno de la educación, para terminar en un último aspecto que está vinculado ya no solo a la salud, sino a la recuperación económica de nuestros países. Sin que puedan volver los niños al colegio presencialmente, no solamente estamos sacrificando a una generación en su educación, sino sobre todo a las mujeres en el desempleo, porque mientras no haya educación, no podrá haber plena reactivación económica. Y eso sacrifica a los adultos, pero especialmente a las mujeres. De manera que privilegiar también, junto al personal, después del personal médico, a los maestros y maestras, para que puedan vacunarse como sector, ya no por edad, sino como sector de cuidado, es fundamental para que la vacunación vaya de la mano de la reactivación económica de nuestras sociedades. Dejaría esas dos propuestas en concreto, que nos propongamos vacunar por lo menos a los mayores de 60 del personal médico para tener una mitigación del próximo pico de la pandemia que nos permita manejarlo, pero además que nos pongamos de acuerdo en ciudades. Insisto, Bogotá está lista y le agradecería mucho a la Organización Mundial de la Salud a que nos ayude a concretar convenios lo más pronto posible con los países y farmacéuticas que he mencionado, AstraZeneca, Janssen, la rusa, Sputnik y el portafolio de vacunas chino, porque tienen la tecnología que nos permitiría no solo en el corto plazo hacer fill and finish de vacunas del COVID-19, sino en el largo plazo volver a producir vacunas de diferente tipo y enfermedades desde Colombia. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Your Excellency, and thank you once again for using your voice to call for vaccine equity. And last but not least, it's my honor to welcome Her Excellency Yvan Aki Sawyer, the Mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone. Your Excellency, welcome and thank you for joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nicholas. And thank you very much to C40s for giving us as representatives the platform to share some reflections. As you said, I'm the Mayor of Freetown, and here in Sierra Leone, the rollout began just this week, on Monday, and we have currently 296,000 doses, which will need to be split into two, of course, because they're double doses, so that it just represents a very small percentage of the overall population. And although there are more vaccines expected in country, the challenge that has been expressed by my colleague mayors is one that we face as well in the city of Freetown. But it's also a challenge which we all know is facing the entire continent of Africa, where the orders for vaccines currently stand at about 38% of what is required. And as we met yesterday, and again, thank you, Dr. Shredders, for joining that closed-door meeting with C40 mayors, it's been really fascinating to hear the experiences from across the world, to hear the experiences of those who really, like Los Angeles, are able to talk about a mass vaccination rollout, in contrast to some of us where it's a rollout, but can you use the word mass in that context? And to have conversations around vaccine hesitancy, something which is really, really key, so that even where you have the vaccines, you still have challenges with having acceptance of the vaccines by members of the population. Different ideas are being shared by mayors, different experiences, and we are learning from each other how to overcome that hesitancy. But perhaps what I'd like to focus on most is this question of inequity, and what will be the long-term impact in respect of the ability for us as cities and, of course, as countries also to ensure that this green and just recovery that everyone's been talking about actually happens. Green is an element which will require financing. Just is an element which requires equity. What we don't want to see, and I was very interested in what Dr. Chedros said about his meeting just now with the Caribbean island leaders. What we don't want to see is greater inequality being driven by the inequality of a vaccine rollout. And this is really possibility. A country like ours and a city like mine has not seen the devastation in numbers from a health perspective that other cities have experienced around the world. To date, we've had 2,222 cases, confirmed cases in Freetown. Of course, we know the testing could have been more and therefore the numbers could have been more, but that notwithstanding, we're still talking about 2,000 plus cases and 80 deaths. You'd almost think that COVID had passed us by, but it hasn't, because the economic impact has been significant. And what we face and what other countries and cities in emerging economies that don't have the access to the vaccine in the same way as countries who are ordering 5 times what they require, 3 times what they require, and holding on to these. What we face is economic exclusion and greater inequality. We face a risk of being in a situation where vaccine proof, vaccine passes are needed for travel. That could have an impact on, well, certainly will have an impact on tourism, because if you have a vaccine pass, you're not going to come as a tourist to a country where there's very low levels of vaccination. And similarly, when it comes to value chains, this is again an area where we could see our countries being excluded. We could see our cities being excluded. So on behalf of C40s and speaking as a mayor from a city in the global south, which is really seeing this disparity played out, and we are very concerned about how it will move from a disparity in a vaccine rollout to reinforcing inequalities, reinforcing economic exclusion, and thereby putting everyone at risk. And I say everyone at risk because we all talk about leave no one behind, about the Sustainable Development Goals. And we all know that with climate change and climate action, we can't afford to leave anyone behind. Well, with the vaccine rollout, we really can't afford that either, because climate change, climate action needs to be financed. Reinforcing inequality of vaccine in the vaccine rollout, reinforcing inequality of economic positions will make it harder and harder for those of us in emerging economies to be able to pay for the really desperate climate action that we need to put in place, whether it's from adaptation or mitigation angles. And this will have an impact on everyone. So in closing, I'd just like to say again, we're so grateful that the COVAX is seeking to have an equitable distribution of the vaccine. Want to reiterate the importance of this happening, because if we don't, then we will not overcome this outbreak, this pandemic. It will just continue to move around the globe. And ultimately, those who are holding on to vaccine, those who have more than they need, will find themselves no better off, because, as has been said by the medical experts, variants will arise, the disease will, the virus will continue to spread. So this is the time for us to be determined to ensure this equity happens, equity on the vaccine rollout, and ultimately equity in terms of economic opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your leadership. And thank you to all 3 mayors for giving us your time today. Finally, this Sunday marks the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. 2020 will not only be remembered for the pandemic, it will also be remembered as the year when issues around racial injustice were brutally exposed. Like vaccine equity, racial equity must be an essential part of our shared recovery from COVID-19. Christian, back to you.
Thank you very much, Director General, and thank you very much to our guests. I'll open the line for the questions now. As usual, please, if you want to ask a question or put in the queue for the questions, raise your hand with the raise your hand signal. We'll start with Sophia Mokoena from SABC South Africa, please. Sophia, unmute yourself.
Thank you so much. The question is directed to the DG in particular. There were concerns on the continent on how Tanzania is handling the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of sharing information and transparency. To date, we haven't seen any reports in terms of the impact of the pandemic in that country. We now have a new president, Dr. Tedros. What is your view? Do you think there will be a time where Tanzania will open up and really be transparent about the impact of COVID-19 in that country?
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to use this opportunity to express our condolences and also sympathy to the people of Tanzania and the family of the late President Magufuli. From myself and all my colleagues in WHO. And also, I would like to congratulate the new president on her appointment. I have already stated this earlier today, actually. Look forward to working with the new president very closely and help them in any way possible. This virus has affected the whole world, and no country can say that we don't have the virus. I think working together and stamping this virus out of every country will be very important, and it starts from sharing information and also taking all the right measures to control the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Director General. With this, we move to the next question, and that's Simon Ateba from Today News Africa, please. Simon, unmute yourself.
Thank you for taking the question. This is Simon Ateba with Today News Africa in Washington, D.C. Dr. Tedros said the other day that even after COVID-19 is defeated, the trauma associated with it may linger for years to come. And here in the US, President Biden signed his $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan a few days ago that includes billions of dollars for mental health this year, next year, and beyond. It is an example that other countries should follow around the world. How should countries begin to prepare now to deal with what will come after COVID? And what type of trauma are we talking about? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Let me give this to Dr. Ryan, please.
Simon, yes, and thank you for raising that. Certainly those countries that are not only investing in ending this phase of the pandemic, but looking to the future recovery, this is really important that both are seen as part of planning now. We commend all countries that are both looking to the ending the pandemic and to the welfare of their citizens and the recovery of their citizens, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well. The Director General spoke to faith leaders this morning, not only about the mental and physical healing, but the healing that people need from within as well. So this is a very, very grave crisis we face going forward. We've seen not only a pandemic of the virus, a pandemic of misinformation and hate in many cases, and also a growing mental strain on people, and both in terms of the socioeconomic impacts, the impact of tragedy and loss, the loss of being able to move about and do your normal daily activities, the isolation and marginalization that many people have felt. So in order for countries to recover, there is going to have to be a plan for that. Health services need to come back online. Mental health services need to be invested in. They were massively underinvested in before this pandemic. They were already the Cinderella science of health, and I think we need to recognise that mental health is a major part of our capacity to recover from this pandemic. So yes, we need to plan for that recovery, not just economically, but as communities, as society. The Director General has said many times, we cannot leave anyone behind. We're doing that already through the way in which vaccines are being distributed. We're seeing lots and lots and lots of people being left behind. And as Yvonne said, and greetings Yvonne, I think we last worked together in the front lines of Ebola response in 2014 and 15 in Freetown. There's a second inequity brewing, because there's not only the inequitous situation with relation to vaccine distribution, but if then the distribution of vaccine results in people not being able to move, or people being restricted in their social and economic activity, not because of a choice to take a vaccine or not, but by not having simple access to that vaccine, that will introduce further inequity, both between countries and for individuals within countries. So I do think we need to look now towards a plan that gets us beyond the pandemic as a major public health problem, and recognise that there's a lot more to heal than just bodies.
If I could just come in very briefly and just mention that WHO with partners have issued a lot of different types of advice and guidance on how to deal with coping with this pandemic of people of all ages, whether they're children, and releasing a book to talk about how children are coping with the uncertainties of what's happening right now, with schools being closed, of maybe losing a parent or a grandparent to this disease, all the way through up through older ages. And so under the leadership of Devorah Castell and others at WHO, and again with partners around the world, looking at how we are coping with the stress during the pandemic, mental health and psychosocial considerations during the outbreak itself and beyond, looking at the impact on mental, neurologic, and substance use during the pandemic. There's a whole series of guidance materials that WHO has issued to help support with this and think now, how do we help people now? Because all of us have been impacted by this pandemic. All of us have been either impacted directly by losing a loved one, or the uncertainties of losing jobs, not going to school, and just really not understanding how much longer we're going to have to deal with this. So the time to invest is now, the time to ensure that part of the recovery includes mental health, and put those investments in now. So we've offered some support in this, and again, we're working across many different partners. It's in all different languages, it's for all different age groups. But as an individual, if you need help, reach out. If you, as an individual, reach out to loved ones and check in on them every day. Use the technology that you have to reach your loved ones. We say physical distance, we don't say social distance. And that's on purpose, because we need to find ways to connect with our loved ones around the world. And as an individual, find something that makes you happy every day. Whatever that may be, find some joy in every day, and take some time for yourself. It's okay not to be okay right now, but reach out. Reach out for some help, and those of you, contact your loved ones and make sure that they're okay.
Thank you very much. And I would like to ask Yvonne Akisoya, maybe, the mayor of Freetown, if she wants to add here.
Thanks. As I mentioned, the context here has been different, but yet there are similarities. It's been different from the health angle. And as Mike said, and yes, great to see you, Mike. As Mike said, there's been such an underinvestment in health facilities. And when it comes to mental health, that was already there. And where the mental health challenge is coming here, it's not so much isolation, because we've not been in the position of lockdowns for protracted periods of time. We've had 2 3-day lockdowns, and that's as extensive as it's been. We have had curfews, but it doesn't create the same impact. But there is still a huge pressure which comes from the economic toll. So the idea that we need to be investing in mental health and mental care comes back to the point that I made earlier. There need to be finances. It's really a chicken and egg, where you have an under-resourced health sector beforehand with very, very little by way of mental health support. And then you have economic pressure. We must get ourselves to a position where the economies can grow, where our economy can grow, so that you can really talk about investing in healthcare and mental health. Otherwise, we're not really going to move from here. Thank you.
I would like to add, I'm glad the mayor raised the economic side of it. We had a meeting today with the leaders of many Caribbean countries. And I remember the presentation or the statement from the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda, His Excellency Prime Minister Brown. He said his country actually lost 18% of its GDP just last year alone. And they expect the same impact this year. So as the mayor said, the economic impact on countries actually have a ripple effect on other social issues or health issues, including mental health. So the economic recovery will be very important. As she had said, it will be a chicken and egg. When people cannot have job opportunities, cannot have employment, cannot have some way to sustain themselves, then even having a mental health program in the package may not help. So some countries will be able to allocate funding to recover in a comprehensive way, addressing the health issues, the economic issues, and so on. But many countries will have difficulty in recovery because they don't have the resources or the economic capacity, or they will not be able to allocate money to their economic sector to recover. So that's why the involvement of the international financing institutions will be very, very important. And one thing that was proposed by the Caribbean countries is for international financing institutions to be open to concessional borrowing. So, and of course, the donor countries, high-income countries, will also have the obligation to help developing world to recover. So the economic support, financial support, will be very important, and the recovery can only be a recovery if it's addressed in a comprehensive way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all. I believe we have one question for the mayor of Bogota, and I'll call on Alejandro Riano from the online magazine mewisconsin.com. Alejandro, if you're there, please unmute yourself.
Muchas gracias por tomar la llamada. Muchas gracias. Señor alcalde, en su propuesta usted propone básicamente producir vacunas para ayudar a la distribución y a la producción y a la distribución de vacunas ya aprobadas. Pero no sé si sepa que ya en muchos de los equipos de investigación que están trabajando con el COVID fuera de Colombia, la mayoría de personas que trabajan en su desarrollo son colombianos. No sé si es mejor pedir, y usted habla de que en el 2001 se congeló la investigación en Colombia, no sé si es mejor pedir que se cree un equipo de científicos colombianos para ayudar a la producción y la creación de una posible vacuna colombiana, aprovechando que en estos momentos hay interés económico y político en Colombia para crear esta opción.
Now, Alejandro, I have to apologize because as you started speaking, unfortunately, the mayor dropped off because I understand she had to leave for somewhere else. And unfortunately, this is not a question that we can refer to any other of the mayors. It's a very Bogota-specific one. Apologies again, and I'll have to go to the next question, and that would be for Helen Branswell from Stat News. Helen, please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for taking my question. I think it would be for Dr. Samara or Dr. O'Brien if they're on the line. Much of the world's population may end up being vaccinated with the vaccines that have been produced by Chinese manufacturers or Russian manufacturers. Have any of those vaccines been submitted for EUL listing to WHO? If not, is WHO encouraging them to put, dossiers in and getting any kind of indication of whether they will be coming? Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'll ask Dr. Rogerio Gaspar, Director for Regulation and Pre-Qualification here in the room, to take this.
Thank you very much for the question. So answering directly to the two cases that were referred on the so-called Chinese vaccines, so Sinopharm and Sinovac, they have been submitted through the EUL mechanism through the WHO. They are currently under assessment. As it was referred in the previous meetings, WHO conducted site inspections since January on the manufacturing sites in China, with all the difficulties going through the quarantines as it was reported at that moment in time. We are in the middle of the evaluation with a list of questions that were put to both companies to solve some of the issues detected during the GMP inspections. Those issues are being solved, so it's assessment ongoing, and we hope to conclude the process at some point during the month of April. Concerning the Gamaleya Institute product, there have been a number of discussions with the Gamaleya Institute and the company representing it. And currently the status is that the complete documentation for the EUL has not yet been submitted. But in the meanwhile, our pre-qualification team has been looking at different parts and components of the data that was submitted. But I have to refer that the complete set of data has not yet been submitted to WHO. Thank you.
Dr. Bruce Elwood, please.
Hi, Helen, and thanks for the question. As I think we've mentioned on previous occasion, WHO encourages all manufacturers of COVID-19 vaccines that may prove efficacious and safe in the battle against COVID to be submitted for consideration for emergency use listing. So while Rogerio referred to 2 or 3 specific products, in fact, we encourage all manufacturers, and we've even put in place a special process that Rogerio's team actually put in place and called for expressions of interest so that we could do rolling submissions as early as possible, as early as data become available, because our goal is to ensure that every safe, efficacious, quality-assured product can be assessed and made available to the world's population as rapidly as possible. So, Helen, extremely important question that you raised, because we're seeing everywhere, we heard from the mayors just now, from Yvonne, the others, about the tremendous demand for these vaccines. So we're trying to look at every single product as rapidly as possible. And I would go back again and reiterate the plea the Director General has made to manufacturers since last year to engage with that process, submit those products as rapidly as possible and the data so that we can ensure that they're fully assessed as rapidly as possible. So thanks again, super important question, especially in this time where there simply is not enough vaccine to meet the demands and needs of the world.
Thank you very much, both. With this, we move to Corinne Gretler from Bloomberg. Corinne, please unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. It's just a super quick one on the timing of the publication of the Origin study report. Is that still slated to be published next week, as far as you know, or is it looking maybe more likely to be the following week?
Yes, I believe we have Dr. Peter Ben Emberek, WHO expert on the food safety, and of course the international lead of the WHO-convened global study, with us online. If so, Dr. Ben Emberek, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, we're still working on the report, and as you can imagine, it's a complicated process, having the entire team, international team and Chinese team around the globe. So we are working with different time zones. So each time we are working on a part of the report, it takes time to get everybody on board. So there is nothing, there is nothing unusual in that it takes time to finalize such a long and big report. There are also, of course, the fact that we have to translate everything forth and back between English and Chinese. So it takes time, but we are hoping, and we are well on the way to be able to release the report next week. But again, without 100% guarantee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, we'll head to Stephanie Nebehai from Reuters. Stephanie, please unmute yourself.
Actually, that was my question also regarding the timing of the report, whether you thought it would still be issued in March, because my understanding is it's, there's been a lot of back and forth, and that the timing has been delayed again. Do you expect it in March then?
I think that was just answered. Dr. Ben-Emberg said most likely next week without 100% guarantee, and that would just work with the timeline. So thank you, and I'll go for the next question. That's John Saracostas from The Lancet. John, please go ahead. John, please unmute yourself. I don't hear from John Saracostas. We'll move to the next person. That's Nina Larson from the AFP. Nina, please unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Very well.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking my question. Following the recommendations from the EMA and also now the WHO, a number of countries have now said they'll resume vaccination with the AstraZeneca vaccine. But I'm wondering how concerned you are that confidence in this vaccine in Europe and beyond may have been undermined by these on-off decisions that countries have made. If you could say something about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Bruzel, please.
Thank you very much for the question. Anytime you roll out a vaccine like this to millions and millions of people, there are going to be coincidental and other events that are going to happen in parallel with its rollout. And this has been the case with almost all products. And what the populations are generally looking for is that these get properly assessed, properly evaluated, so that their confidence can be assured. And in fact, I would think it's interesting. I spoke to a number of people, as you can imagine, about this issue, a number of people from general population, a more general population, meaning not us working in the response. And their general sense was, great, this thing, they actually had a greater confidence in the product because it had gone through such scrutiny over the last week in particular, through the EMA processes, through WHO's processes as well. And again, as we've said from the very, very beginning, we would continue to look at any signal whatsoever to evaluate these products. So of course there's going to be concerns that populations will have, but I think that the speed with which countries have taken on board the findings and then rapidly reinstituted the vaccination hopefully will help to assure populations that indeed these they should go forward with the vaccination. It's a great vaccine. It's one of the most important products in the rollout of these vaccines globally. So yes, always a risk that there will be a hit, but generally what people are really looking for are these things being properly assessed, properly evaluated, and that's really been the case with this vaccine. So hopefully populations globally are going to have even greater confidence that these vaccines are being properly scrutinized. I don't know, Ruggiero or Mike, if you have anything you'd add?
Yeah, probably not going through the details of the data and referring everybody to the declarations on the websites of the European Medicines Agency and also WHO since this afternoon after the GAC subcommittee met today. Just to reinforce the increased level of international collaboration between the different regulatory authorities. During the entire week, there were a number of expert meetings, both at the European Medicines Agency, at the WHO, with cross-participation of expertise between those two groups. And this has been enlarged to other regions. Just to report that today at the GAC committee, for example, there were reports not only from the VG-base, global database on safety on vaccines and medicines, but also the participation of the authority from India, where is manufactured one of the important products that was being assessed. So the most important message here is this for the regulatory system and for the life cycle management of medicines or vaccines. This is a normal situation. It will happen every time that a medicine has some report being fundamental or not. The system works like this.
The exposure that has currently is because the intensity of the exposure with COVID-19, of course, and some shortage of vaccines in some regions also. But the main message to take home is that the system is working, the assessment is being done, information is being updated both by EMA at the summary of product characteristics of the product that is approved. We are continuing with our regulatory process because EUL needs also now to integrate with the authorities from India and the Republic of Korea about some changes on the information package for the 2 vaccines that are produced under the EUL. So this is a normal situation under control by the regulatory authorities and with total transparency in terms of the communication of the events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we'll have Dr. Ryan.
I mean, just one point, because I think a situation like this also should cause us all to reflect and think. We've got, you know, a very concerned population out there waiting for the vaccines. These events and incidents occur. We have systems in place that we need to place faith in, and they've come through. But we also have to look, even you, our media, and you play a hugely important role in identifying issues, in identifying successes, and identifying shortcomings. But there was a tremendous media explosion around this event when there was very little information around that. And many, I think, political leaders came under intense scrutiny. They were being asked constant questions. There wasn't a definitive answer. And many chose that precautionary principle of shutting down the use of vaccine, which potentially further undermined the confidence in that vaccination. I remember, I think, at the last presser here, the first 5 questions at the presser were about AstraZeneca vaccine. So we all have to look at this and see how we can all do better in future. How can we get information out quicker that's more definitive? How we can trust in those regulatory agencies which have proven themselves again and again and again. But also how we communicate around these issues, especially as Rosario said, this happens with new products, but we're all operating in a new environment. This happened before, but nobody, we didn't have this intense 24-hour media cycle, this intense scrutiny. It's a very important part of the cycle to have that scrutiny. But it is generating unwanted effects because in the end, we get to the end of this and resolve. You've written your articles, the EMA have written their press statements, so have WHO, but what may be left in the aftermath of that is very confused people who now have some doubts in their minds, and that's the awful outcome of this. And all of us need to look, all of us, including you, our colleagues in the media, at what part we play in that process and how we can find better ways to do this in the future.
Dr. Maria van Kerkhoff, please.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I know it's a lot of answers to one question, but it's an important one, and I just wanted to acknowledge the concerns of people. So we've talked about the vaccines itself and the process of itself, and these are safe and effective vaccines, and it's important that vaccination continues. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that people have questions, that people have concerns, and this is normal, this is natural, this is good. But you need to make sure you find information from good sources so that any fear that you may have or questions that you have, you find the right information to answer those questions. So it's good to question, it's good to ask, but it's good to get the right information. We have seen these are safe and effective vaccines, and vaccination is a critical part of ending this pandemic, as is physical distancing, washing your hands, cleaning your hands, making sure you avoid crowded spaces, opening up of windows, practicing respiratory etiquette. All of this plays a role, and vaccination is an incredibly powerful tool that we have now added to our toolkit. So ask the questions, demand good answers, but find good sources of information, and know that the processes are in place to look and to challenge and to make sure that we have safe and effective vaccines that are out there.
Thank you very much for these really important clarifications. We've come to the end of our cycle of questions. We've reached the hour, and before I give back to Dr. Tedros for the final comments, I would like to ask the mayors if there are any final comments to make, or Dr. Tedros, you want to invite them possibly. Let's look for the mayors. Freetown, please.
Thank you. I think I just want to reiterate what we've been saying earlier on, and which has come up a number of times, the importance of us not overlooking the economic impact that this inequitable distribution could result in. So really just putting the onus back onto those countries, those economies, WHO and its partners to continue to appeal for us not to make the wrong decision. This rollout has to be equitable. I think it was Dr. Tedros who said yesterday that we need to ensure that every country has some vaccine rather than some countries having all the vaccines. But that can't be underestimated, because the economic fallout, the economic inequality, economic exclusion will continue to compound problems of migration, climate inaction, and the unrest and challenges that come with deepened economic inequity. Let us not let this pandemic result in the opposite of a green and just recovery. A green and just recovery is what we need. An equitable rollout of the vaccine is going to be a key part of making sure we get that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne Akisoya, Mayor of Freetown, Sierra Leone. I'll hand over to Ajay Sowa, the Mayor of Accra, Ghana.
Thank you very much. I associate myself with the comment made by my colleague, Mayor Akisoya of Freetown, and I want to add that it's extremely important in this time, as we experience this pandemic, that equity becomes a hallmark in everything that we do, because we are not living in normal times. And what we are experiencing currently, that some countries have more than necessary of vaccines whilst others do not have, is completely unacceptable and it's unfair. Hence, I'm appealing to the WHO to use all powerful means that you have, and all stakeholders, including the media, mayors, and political leaders, to add their voice for equitable distribution of the vaccine. Africa is currently experiencing low vaccines that had been able to give it to us, and that is not fair at all. I'm also adding that in order for us to get more vaccines, there are many manufacturing companies, and this is not a time to make money. This is a time to save lives. And I'd like to quote our President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, when he says that at this moment, we don't know how to bring back lives, but we know how to bring back the economy. Hence, every effort that we have to be able to save lives should be that. I want to add my voice to the fact that we need to accelerate the transfer of technology so that other manufacturing companies that are in any part of the world, including Ghana, to be given the opportunity to manufacture the vaccines for us in our various countries, so that we can have more and vaccine more people, we can reach herd immunity at the earliest possible, and we can go back to our normal life. I want to say that at this moment, the companies that had the vaccines, if there's an opportunity to compensate them, we should do so, but we shouldn't be focusing on how to make money out of the vaccine at the moment. And I hope that your meeting with the WTO next week should be more fruitful. South Africa and India made the effort. It was not successful, but we should keep knocking and pushing. I hope that it will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Sowa. And as I mentioned before, Mayor Lopez from Bogota is unfortunately not with us online anymore. So before I hand back to the Director General for the final remarks, let me remind everyone that the sound records from today's press briefing and the statement will be issued right after this briefing, and the whole briefing will be online. The transcript will be online as of tomorrow. Director General, please.
Thank you, Christian. So I would like to borrow from what Mayor Sowa said, keep pushing. So we will keep pushing. And I fully concur with what you said, Mayor Sowa and Mayor Akisoya. I fully concur with what you said, so I think that would be enough instead of adding more. You have said all the things that should be said, and thank you so much. And I would like to thank all mayors, Mayor Sowa, Mayor Akisoya, and Mayor Lopez, for joining us today, and look forward to continue to working with you, not only on vaccine equity, but on healthy cities, climate change, air pollution, and the other agenda that we have together. And thank you also to the media who joined us today, and all colleagues in the presser and our interpreters. Bon weekend. Thank you so much.